All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have with me Tara Galeano, and today we're going to talk about a couple different things. One being psychedelic orgasms, which that just sounds amazing, and I'm sure everybody really wants to know what that is. And then the second, we're going to dive into your book, Rediscovering My Body. So thank you, Tara, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
If you don't mind, just for everybody listening, can you just give us a quick, introduction of yourself, kind of your history, your journey, and to, everything that we're going to kind of dive into today?
Sure. So, I'm trained as a psychotherapist. So I do talk therapy with people, and I've been doing this for a couple of decades. And at the very beginning of the journey, all of my clients wanted to speak about sex, sexual identity, relationships, and preferences and fantasies. And I actually had zero classes on human sexuality, if you can believe that, in a graduate program. But it was true. And so then I needed to get up to speed. I got certified as a sexologist and certified as a sex therapist, and really began to consume all things sex in my professional life. So this way I could be, up to par to meet my clients where they wanted to be in the conversation. And really, I felt honored that they were so authentic and vulnerable and wanting to speak about sex and sexuality. And I just didn't have at least the professional skills to meet them. And so that's where my journey began. And then kind of light years later, a couple of decades later, been working with women, particularly women with cancer, and that's where my book, Rediscovering My Body, emerged. And then that book is for all women, but it began with the work that I was doing with these incredible Amazon women who were courageously wanting to reclaim their sexuality, even though they were forging forward in a life that seemed really uncertain. They didn't know whether they were going to live. They didn't know the prognosis. They didn't know their medical treatment. They felt very objectified by the medical community. And so really wanting to tap into this vital life force energy of sex and sexuality and really use it for healing and for pleasure. And so that is kind of a big piece of the work that I've been bringing forth in the world. And then the book emerged from that based on the class that I was teaching to these women, because what I found is that all women really wanted to know this, and it wasn't available in the way that they could actually dive in and create this experience for themselves where they were the expert on their own body, on their own experiences. And that's what my book is about. It's a guidebook. It really helps women with activities and practices and exercises so they can begin to understand what's true for them in the moment. Because I feel like we all have this experience that we're experts on, and that it doesn't necessarily need to be validated by another human, right? That's ours. And when we claim that as our own sense of mastery, then it's like we're unstoppable.
So something interesting you said in the beginning, because I find that, like when you were saying that all of your clients that were coming to you wanted to talk about sex and sexuality, did you find that kind of surprising? Because I mean, sex itself is still a very taboo topic in the sense of, people speaking about it openly, feeling comfortable to be able to speak to people about it in general. And even now, I still find that, when you talk about sex with people, so many people are still so closed off in just the conversations. It makes them uncomfortable. So were you surprised to find out, or to hear that from all of the people that you were dealing with, that like this is something they wanted to discuss and they wanted somebody to be able to walk them through these things?
I was surprised because it was not what I was advertising at all. I was kind of advertising general psychotherapy. And so I thought maybe mood disorders, anxiety, depression, maybe some adaptive troubles, new transitions in life. But so I wasn't expecting sex and sexuality. And I'm so glad, because it really set the trajectory of my career of, okay, this is something that I actually wanted to explore. And I didn't know that it was a viable option. And then it was so great to be able to help the people that were coming to me, because when they were really feeling satisfied, they were really doing well.
Yeah. So was it mostly like, was this a lot of people wanting to heal from different sexual traumas, just wanting to learn more about their own sexuality? Like, what do you think the curiosity, or what it was that these women, or that you find that people are lacking, that makes them kind of search out talking to, a therapist or somebody about sex and sexuality compared to, say, just like their friends or things like that?
Yeah. So I think in the beginning it was women and men. And actually, I do
Hmm.
see also a fair amount of men in my practice as well. And it was this desire to speak freely about what was true for them in terms of their experience and their pleasure. And I think there was a really strong desire, especially given the demographics that I was working with. I was working with younger adults who were college age, and some of them were in graduate school as well, but they
Hmm.
wanted to have this sense of exploration and this sense of discovery. And they weren't sure, like, what was the path forward, and really
Hmm.
needed to release a lot of baggage that they'd had laid upon them
Hmm.
by belief systems that were restricting their sense of personal freedom. And so, really letting go of religion, letting go of family beliefs or family ideas about sex and sexuality. So, there was this huge piece of unlearning. These things are just not true. So, miseducation, myths, and setting the path forward so they actually could learn things that were true about themselves and that were anatomically correct, physiologically accurate, and that they could
Hmm.
have a better sense of their own capability.
Right. So do you find then that there is still so much programming around shame and guilt when it comes to our pleasure, when it comes to men and women, enjoying sex for different reasons other than, let's just say, the procreation of what we've all been told and raised to believe is why people have sex? Is that a huge part of the conversation for some of these younger, you know, I guess young adults wanting to learn more about themselves and to, not carry that weight with them?
Yeah. I mean, and Sarah, that's where I began with the young adults. And
Mm-hmm.
that was certainly a huge piece. And now I'm working with people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Oftentimes, it is still the case with them as well. This is that shame shuts us down. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
shame is probably the biggest oppressor that we all need to face in our lifetime if we want greater self expression, if we want liberation of our sexuality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that the biggest thing I think is like even like, being a little bit older, having conversations with my friends, like when kinks or fetishes or things come up that people don't understand or they're not personally into themselves, it's right away, it's like, ew, that's weird. Or like, oh, gross, you do that. And it's still like the conversations that people seem to have or the projection of something that they're not comfortable with, but then to have such a negative thought process or a negative, thoughts or words towards other people for things that maybe they would be into. And as I have these conversations with more and more people, I'm kind of finding that there is a lot of different things with some different kinks or different fetishes that actually can have some very healing powers over our minds, over our bodies from different traumas or different, misconceptions that maybe we had around sex or pleasure itself. And they can be very therapeutic things to kind of dive into, which is really crazy when you think about it, but also kind of nice to know that there's freedom in having different kinks and fetishes and learning about yourself and your sexuality and what works for you and what it actually releases for you.
That's true. That's so true. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, it was Einstein's quote, if we do the same thing over and over and again, and we expect different results, that's a
Mm-hmm.
definition of insanity. And that's so true. So when we actually step out of our comfort zone and try something different, that is okay with ourselves, okay enough to be
Mm-hmm.
expanding our comfort zone, that we actually then feel more expansive within ourselves. Because instead of being narrow and tight, we've expanded a little bit more, and we have the opportunity then to incorporate that into our center so then we can actually show up and be a little bit more expansive. And then
Right.
we have the opportunity to explore more things than we ever have before. And I think curiosity, imagination, playfulness are all really great values when it comes to sex and sexuality.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just having that open mind to kind of, search out different things and have conversations with obviously different therapists, coaches, and people who can kind of help people walk down that road of learning more about themselves and accepting possibly even the idea of some of these things being things that they're into, but maybe they don't understand why they're into it or maybe why they don't understand why they're drawn to it, but being okay with that exploration of curiosity, of wanting to know more and wanting to try new things in a safe and healthy way for yourself as well.
I think that's really powerful and important that they feel okay or confident enough that they can trust themselves to be responsible
Mm-hmm.
for the experience. I think when we collapse or we are doing something and we feel slightly coerced by another or by something else, then that's when things get sticky and problematic. And I'd say that's never the great place to proceed from. It's really so much
Mm-hmm.
better to come to the decision, be relaxed, be somewhat confident, be maybe a little bit scared because there's something about that
Yeah.
nervous energy that creates excitement. And then to be able to step into it and know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so true. I kind of do really want to shift and kind of talk about, you mentioned women that you work with and a lot of the stuff with your book for, women who have been sick or, who have struggled with cancer and things. And I don't think that that has been talked about enough, women's, health and illnesses when it comes to then sex and sexuality, because I think it's something that happens more often that women deal with. And then I think there's a lot of guilt that comes afterwards of maybe when you're going through, a serious illness or health concerns, cancers or something. I know in a healthy relationship that I have personally, and people that I know have carried that burden of, wanting to please and wanting to be available to your partner, to perform, to make sure that they are sexually satisfied. But as a woman, if you're going through a very serious, health issue, there's a huge aspect of your sex life and sexuality that obviously gets affected. And I don't think that's been talked about as much, even on like my podcast. We haven't really dived into that with anybody. So can we kind of shift and talk about that a little bit more? Because obviously that's something you've written a book about. And so what is your experience in talking to these women that are going through these health issues when it comes to sex and sexuality?
I mean, yes, I would say yes to everything that you just highlighted there, Sarah. That's so applicable to the experiences that these women are sharing with me. And I think that this desire to please others is often a really big theme. Is when women are coming to see me, it's really on the edge of their comfort zone. They feel like
Mm-hmm.
they may have depleted their financial resources, their emotional resources, the support system in which they're loved and involved. They feel like they've depleted and used up everything. And so then to go out on a limb and to want to reclaim their sexuality feels really edgy because it feels
Mm-hmm.
superfluous. It feels like a luxury. It doesn't feel like this essential part of who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
when they can justify it, I'm doing this because I'm in a relationship and I want to show up for my partner, then oftentimes they can give themselves permission. And I feel like my job or desire, at least a little bit, right? If I have a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of an agenda, is to kind of blow that out of the water because I really want to dismantle this performative paradigm, which I think often we live. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's fundamental to how we see sexual interactions. It's this linear progression that, I mean, it's almost like, yeah, it's a very formulaic. That there's oftentimes in heterosexual couples that I see, and I see predominantly heterosexual couples, it's a penile vagina intercourse, it's
Mm-hmm.
simultaneous orgasm, and then that's it. And it's very narrow. And even if they're not living that, it is a huge, I would say, interject in how they're thinking about sex. And so there's this performance piece that I need to show up and please my partner, or else they're going to leave me. And I've already
Mm-hmm.
got cancer, and I'm already feeling really vulnerable. And would they just show up for me for the value that I bring just because I am? And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us, whether we have cancer, if we don't, whether we have a life threatening illness or not, don't feel that comfortable within ourselves to believe that is true, and certainly don't feel that comfortable within our relationship to believe that is true. And that's a goodness, that's really a lens into how we are confident in who we are and
Mm-hmm.
how we're confident in our relationships. And so that's a huge piece of this, I would say, undertaking, that the women begin to centralize themselves as the most important person in the room at this time
Mm-hmm.
to give themselves permission to really claim all of who they are within this moment, particularly connecting with other women who've had similar experiences around sex and sexuality, life-threatening illness, and cancer. And when they can drop back into that, there's a sense of normalizing that they can all relate to on some level. And then there's a freedom in that because there's a comfort of, okay, you understand, I don't have to over-explain myself. I don't have to be anything that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. And there's a huge liberation in that in and of itself. And then to come to the sexual piece, which is another layer of intense vulnerability, I would say, for most of us, that is then layered with the shame that we may experience of being in a female body, of having cancer, of not necessarily being sexually functioning in the way that we imagine we
Right.
should. And shoulds are huge in shame. They kind of go
Mm-hmm.
together like that. That there's a lot of power in stepping into that and being okay that that has been a piece of your experience and that it no longer needs to be if you choose something different because there's a pathway forward. And so for
Right.
me, an invitation to my sisters that things can be different, that they can have pleasure because they desire it for themselves is huge. And I think we all need to take responsibility for our orgasms and for our pleasure, regardless of whether we have a life-threatening illness or not. Is that that is the opportunity that we have as we live on this 3D plane in this earthly
Right.
body. So that's kind of my mission is what I see. And it works out that way with women who've had cancer. And I just so honor and support them and want them to see that there's another pathway forward that really includes pleasure and that when they tap into that, they're actually tapping into this vital life force that actually can be regenerative and healing.
Mm-hmm. So do you find though with a lot of the women that like you've talked to and a lot of the information that you've kind of gathered with, women dealing with these life-threatening illnesses and cancer and their sexuality, that it's something that they are able to actually tap into while they are going through treatments or while they are experiencing pain, essentially to help ease some of that pain and some of that frustration or some of those feelings? Or is this something that is really like once you've kind of gone through, it's like, okay, let's reclaim it after? Or is this kind of you're doing it at the same time?
I'd say it's a courageous being who can hold both
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously at the same time. And usually that's not where I see women. But are
Okay.
they welcome to join in and be there as that, as that person who can do both? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I let people self-select. And if they say that they're ready, then I allow them to join in on the class and learn what they're here to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say that it's a lot to hold. I'd say that that experience of cancer being life threatening, not knowing, when their last breath is going to be is mind altering. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's really a critical factor that suppresses most women's and if not all people's urge to be sexual because I feel like I don't have the
Right.
capacity for this now. I'm really
Yeah.
struggling with my own mortality.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. For sure. So if we're talking about kind of more like the rediscovering your body kind of aspect of it for after, people have kind of gone through these extreme journeys of, trying to heal and come out the other side to reclaiming it. What do you find to be kind of I guess the biggest issue that women are struggling with after these illnesses and stuff with their bodies? Is it just because the illness has taken such a toll on them physically? We don't look the same. Like, let's be honest. I mean, women can be very hard on themselves when it comes to our physical, attributes and looks. And, all the work, let's say that we put into, feeling our best when you've obviously gone through something that has completely changed your life and your lifestyle and you've been sick, it changes your looks, it changes body things. There's a lot that is affected. So, do you find it really does kind of start there with the acceptance of the difference of what, say, women physically look like to enjoying looking at themselves or to enjoying that aspect of feeling beautiful in kind of their own skin? Or is it really a lot deeper than, let's just say, the surface level of what it is that I know that we struggle with for insecurities?
I mean, I would say I've seen so many different versions of all of
Mm-hmm.
that. I've even seen partners say, I don't find you attractive anymore. because of how you look now post surgery. So it's heartbreaking all around. And I think that the process is then to really be loving towards oneself
Mm-hmm.
of what is the love that we need at this time. And I think cancer really highlights that. And it is, as you were referencing, Sarah, it is part of a woman's journey at this time in this day and age that we
Mm-hmm.
then begin to diminish how we show up and that we judge ourselves in terms of the outside. And we're
Mm-hmm.
always changing. Hormonally, when we go through the experience of pregnancy, should we choose, our bodies change. Really coming into menarche, I mean, really just having our first period, our bodies change,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether we want that or not. And menopause, but there's so many factors that, I mean, just coming out of pandemic, global pandemic, so many of us have had different experiences of our body and how we show up and how we're seen. And that has been a really big piece of the work, not only how we imagine that we are, so our own self conceptions of body image, but how others are perceiving us. And this power of being seen is really, goodness, it's a tricky piece. So
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of my clients via telehealth, so a lot of it is virtual. And then to have to show up and be in person nowadays, I can see actually causes people more anxiety because they're used to being just a head,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being on a screen. And when the whole body needs to show up, you're showing more of yourself and there's more vulnerability and there's also more shame or there's more self-criticism. So it's a painful place to be, and that causes more suffering for all of us
Mm-hmm.
that we
Yeah.
do that to ourselves. And that's fundamental to the work that I'm wanting women to do. So it's not just how we look, but also the functionality. It's like I'm not normal like I used to be. So if there are alterations rather to the body because of surgery, because of treatment of the cancer, and their erogenous zones that they once identified as these are my sexy parts are now
Mm-hmm.
gone or disfigured or just aren't functioning in the way that they used to, then what I find is oftentimes we're so human, right? We get stuck in the
Mm-hmm.
past and we want to reclaim something that doesn't exist for us anymore. And it's scary to go forward and imagine that we can have that or even better pleasure in a body that does not look the same as it did in the beginning or it did, number of years ago. And I would say by and large that's kind of the human experience over and over again. So we're always evolving, we're always changing, we're
Mm-hmm.
never the same. And the opportunity to really let that go and step into the unknown is courageous all around every moment we do that.
Oh yeah, and I mean like it's a struggle on a daily basis for people who do not have any health issues or have been dealing with cancer or anything. So I can't even imagine like the level of depth that just, really messes with a person to that extreme, right? I mean, it's painful, it is sad, it's hard, and I think especially when you let's just say like you had mentioned that partners who have said like, well, I don't find you physically attractive anymore, to go through these things in such an extreme level, and already the insecurities and the thoughts and feelings that we have about ourselves, then to have that kind of, reaffirmed or confirmed by your partner, the person who you're counting on to still kind of almost make you feel sexy, feel desired, and still feel loved by. I mean, that can just have so many, issues, so many implications on a woman's mental health, I think,
Yes.
for our sex and our sexuality, which is so sad that there is such an attachment to validation from external sources. But I just don't think that we have gotten past that completely. And I do think that there's a lot that goes on now more around women's, healing, sexual healing, traumas, things, all of that, where we really are trying to step into claiming our own pleasure and sexuality for ourselves without, needing that external. But I mean, obviously, that is a journey all in itself. And to do that then with an illness or with cancer, I mean, just makes it 10 times harder when you don't have that kind of support that you're looking for, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I love that framing, Sarah, too, because I do think, particularly here in the United States, we are of this mindset of I have to pull myself up by my bootstraps and I have to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and I do see that and I do advocate that. It's like we do need to take responsibility. And also we are these amazing social beings that we all need to recognize how we're interconnected and how my
Mm-hmm.
thoughts influence your thoughts, how my behaviors influence your behaviors. And that with that process, then not only taking responsibility for how we're showing up, but how we're showing up for the other, for our
Mm-hmm.
beloved, for our family, for our loved ones, and that's really powerful. I mean, in relationship therapy, we're always looking at attunement and attachment and how we're showing up not only for ourselves but for the other, and that's really important too. So when we don't get that reflection back in the way that we had imagined it would be or what we wanted it to be, it can be really painful.
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about the steps or the process of what this kind of looks like. Obviously, the work that you do and what like you've kind of put into, your book of rediscovering your body and kind of helping women, reclaim that sexuality that have gone through these things. Like, so essentially when you are working with somebody, or say if they were to, dive into this and read about it, like what are these steps that it looks like, or what are the beginning things, some tips and stuff that, you give your clients or you would give some women to help them start to reclaim this and to work on those things?
Yes, I am. And so I think the foundational piece is what I see over and over again is this theme of agency and really wanting the woman and encouraging her to step
Mm-hmm.
into her own sense of power and that she has agency or sexual sovereignty, that that's really a
Mm-hmm.
powerful place to begin. And so affirming that over and over again, so this way she can begin to see that reflected not only in herself, but eventually in the environment. And that's really, I'd say, foundational for how we're going to proceed forward. So, what I like to do is I like to provide activities and exercises where she can feel her own knowing and
Mm-hmm.
confidence and expertise of who she is, how she shows up, and her experience. And I like to look at really simple things in terms of what brings her pleasure, not just sexual pleasure, but the sensual pleasure of eating maybe, or of feeling things on her skin, what it is that she sees or she hears that brings her pleasure, but really coming back into the sensations in a very basic way that we all experience moment by moment, but we often overlook because we're looking for the bigger fun, right? We're looking for the
Mm-hmm.
bigger experience or the cathartic experience. And when we can slow things down enough and really appreciate and have gratitude for these simpler things, then we can imagine that there's so much more out there than we had ever thought of or seen before. And that's what I like to give women the opportunity to reframe their experience and reframe their life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love that because it really is kind of about our own internal, journey of, I mean, self discovery and really just learning to go within and to see what it is that we enjoy. But I love that you kind of brought up about like pleasure in different things, in food or the way things, feel on your skin, because I mean, obviously, like there is people who are really, big into food, and you're right. There is some things where it's like you can eat it, and you do have like this, orgasmic kind of feeling in your mouth of enjoyment of a food. But I don't think people would ever really think to kind of take that time to really think about it as you're experiencing that. But it really is another level of adding, that thought into your daily life of as you move about, whether it's going outside or being somewhere, listening to the sound of something, and then really connecting to how that actually makes you feel mentally, which then kind of, physically creates this, well being feeling. Because we always talk about the things that maybe, say, take away from our pleasure or that will turn you off. It could be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be whatever, a light, a something. But to flip it on the other side and be like, okay, but what are the other things that like make you feel pleasure? But it doesn't have to be from a sexual touch or thought, but just the things are around you. And it can be smells. There is some times where it's like all of a sudden you get a smell of something and it creates such a feeling of like, well-being in your mind and your body. But people don't really seem to like connect that on a deeper level. So I love that you kind of said that, because yeah, it's not something that like I think we are very aware of, but we probably should be more aware of these things as we move about in our day to day, right?
Well, I wouldn't say should, but we could be.
Could be. Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just an enhancement, right, to our own
Yeah.
experience. And I did have this wonderful personal retreat with a client recently where I took her to a hot spring where it was clothing optional, and she'd had a bilateral mastectomy, and it had been a number of years since she'd actually been naked in
Mm-hmm.
a group of people that didn't know her. And it took a lot of courage, it took a lot of strength, and there was also tremendous freedom because she was
Mm-hmm.
anonymous. Nobody knew her. And initially, so it was this process of exposure therapy. So initially, she came in and she was wearing her swimsuit. And of course, it's clothing optional, so people are in swimsuits, but people are also naked. And
Mm-hmm.
then as she felt more comfortable, she could feel, I actually could be naked here and that there are no negative consequences. And then she took the bathing suit off and we were together. So we were I'm hosting this retreat and making sure she's feeling comfortable. And then the final step was she had to go off by herself and have that experience to just
Mm-hmm.
deepen into what is that like for herself. And she
Yeah.
actually was able to report that it was profoundly, I would say, revelatory, that that experience just revealed to her so much about how she had internalized some idea that she might be somebody's worst nightmare that she then began to suppress and hid herself from
Right.
view. And then she was able to emerge and be seen, and it actually was pleasurable. I was like
Oh,
something
yeah.
really normal and mundane about it and extremely pleasurable. So I
Yeah.
love these success stories.
Oh, absolutely, right. Because it's very inspiring for other women to hear and to know that, hey, you know what? Like you said before, what I'm going through and what I feel about myself and what I'm thinking is something that other women are dealing with as well. And to know that there is support and that there is the resources and there's tools out there and there's all of these things that, you can kind of tap into to kind of really walk that path along with the support of other women, right? I kind of want to talk about this whole psychedelic orgasm aspect of everything. Because, I mean, obviously, when I hear psychedelic, obviously my mind goes to like, some really kind of fun drugs that usually help you achieve those level of things. So, what are we talking when we say psychedelic orgasm? Is this really just a feeling or is there more aspects or parts to this?
I love it. Huh? Is this just a feeling? Yeah. Huh? I mean, maybe it is only a feeling, and it
Okay.
is a feeling that you can tap into at any moment, at any time. So the reason why I say that is because yes, you can do a psychedelic, or you can take a psychedelic and have that interaction and have it, I would say, come into your being and then release that experience of
Mm-hmm.
the psychedelic orgasm, or you can just allow it to happen. And so I think both ways are equally valid, right? The experience can be had either way, but the psychedelic cervical orgasm, as I know it, is one that is one of allowing. So I just, it's fascinating to me the process of sexuality these days. It's like we take or men take a little blue pill, they have an erection, and again,
Mm-hmm.
coming into this kind of linear, maybe even masculine progression of sex and sexuality. And there's something about that we take a pill, our body responds, and then we're ready, and then we can have sex. And so the
Mm-hmm.
engagement is really, I would say, in some respects, aggressive, and that there's an artifice there. It's not necessarily organic, for whatever that means, but there's something about taking things as it unfolds in nature. So flowers just emerge from plants after a whole process, and it can never be rushed unless it's in a lab, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
does unfold in its own natural time when we allow it. And there's something about a psychedelic cervical orgasm or a psychedelic orgasm that is about the allowing. It is not necessarily about the doing or the ingestion of a pill or a substance. It is about the allowing, which is a much more feminine progression than masculine progression. So if you think about the polarities of the energy, masculine energy is generative or penetrating. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be directive, and maybe feminine energy is more receptive and creative. and that we all have both of those energies or all of those energies within our being, and we have proclivities that maybe we lean into one of those more than the other. And so what I'm suggesting is that in this performative paradigm, it, I would say, is a much more masculine way of showing up, and that there's this idea, even the languaging around it, if we have words for it, is achieving orgasm, or then we finished. It's like that's the conclusion. Whereas if we're in the experience of pleasure, we can have it on and on. And so then what does this psychedelic orgasm, how does it then become distinguished from like tantra or some other type of lovemaking that might last for hours? Well, I would say it's about the activation of the endogenous DMT within our being, right? So endogenous means that it's in the body already. So the DMT that
Okay.
we experience, yeah, is that psychedelic part that is already in our bodies. So there's an activation of our being through this process of the psychedelic orgasm that activates the DMT within our brain that allows for this orgasmic release, or this, I mean, I would say profound rapture. I mean, it's just, it connects the whole being in a different way, where you're just connecting with the orgasm in your reproductive organs with the brain. So really this full body, total being experience.
How does a person actually activate and tap into that DMT aspect of it? Because I mean, I have friends that will take DMT, and I mean, that's a very quick few minute intense journey of whatever they have going on when they have taken that. But to be able to release that in yourself for the purpose of what we're talking about here for orgasms, how does somebody even begin to like understand how to release that or to activate it?
I mean, it's a process. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, and I would say the key elements feel somewhat antithetical to how we live our current existence, and that it is one of allowing and it is one of surrender. And so,
Okay.
I mean, I mean, it's fascinating too, as the body is activated in sexual arousal, oftentimes there's this willfulness, and I will see and hear people talk about their experiences where they're really in the front of their body and they're going towards it. I'm going towards orgasm. So there's this energetic experience going forward. And the opportunity is to really be relaxed and surrender and allow. So almost like I'm going to be taken, right? So I'm going to be taken to orgasm, or I'm going to surrender to
Mm-hmm.
that orgasmic experience, which is much more emphasis on the back body and allowing. It's not about doing or going towards something. It's about the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate surrender, which is similar to the DMT that's ingested, but it is
Okay.
about that surrender in the body. And
So,
it's a whole process that I
yeah.
can't quite unpack here, but but that's the key. It's the key is to surrender and not to be going towards it, because when we get into that kind of frenzy of I have to do, which is how we live so much of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
you can't create it.
Okay. So it sounds like there's an aspect of a spiritual. I don't want to necessarily say spiritual in the sense for like every people who are maybe more religious or whatever, but the art of kind of letting go, of sitting into those feelings and being able to just discover what comes up without having to process it as it comes up, but being able to like release. You know, I do find that when you're in an intimate setting with, say, your partner, and I do find it is hard for women to stop for a minute to think about their partner, not be thinking about them, not, have their situation at the forefront, but really to actually like lay down and like settle into those feelings for yourself. Like that in itself is a mental challenge in any sexual situation, to be like, hey, wait a minute, what am I feeling? And that is that whole taking back our pleasure aspect, I think, of sex for a woman, because we are so focused on what our partner is doing. Like, are they going to, come right away? Like, do I have time to even have an orgasm here before what they're doing? Like, and it's the unfortunate thing, I think, where sometimes a woman's orgasm can be so tied to their partner's ability to say last for a longer period of time, for them to be able to achieve that, for them to be able to do the rhythm that, say, a woman, each woman is so different, but the rhythm of maybe what is working for our bodies to be able to help us achieve that goal of releasing into this orgasm and this full body state, when unfortunately it can be very tied to, what are you doing over here for 5 minutes? Did you speed up? Did you slow down? Did you do this? Like, it's the whole distraction of like what is happening, because so many things are going on and we're just trying to breathe and release into this. But like it's such a tricky balance, right? And to be able to explain that to, say, your male partner, and just be like, look, I need you to stay at this steady rate at this here, like, let me do this. Oh my God. Can you imagine yeah. But I mean, it sounds beautiful and it sounds like something to totally everybody wants to achieve. And, but even when I think about my own personal sexual experiences in, let's say in the last little bit, it's just like, yeah, I mean, even if I'm in that moment where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, stay right there. That's like, nope, stopping. Sorry, I can't, because if I keep going, I'm going to release it. Oh, okay. So my orgasm is so tied to your roller coaster of what you are or aren't able to do. But
Yes, yes, yeah. And I love everything that you just said, Sarah, and there's so much there to unpack. It's like,
yeah,
and just some words, it's like achieve and goal. And those words, it's like, okay, let's just put them over there. And then where would we
yeah.
be? And I just want to say that in heterosexual couples, I used to say that sexual intercourse lasts 7 to 9 minutes. And now I've been updated that it's like 5 to 7 minutes. And that is, from beginning to ejaculation for most people.
Yeah.
And for women, that is not true. It usually takes
Mm-hmm.
us 20 to 30 minutes to just get aroused.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then if we're aroused, then maybe we have desire, because it used to be when we were more hormonal, and maybe from a masculine perspective, there's desire because they're always wanting to be sexual. Then there's arousal and they're experiencing it in their physiology, and then they can engage. And that's not always the case for us as women, that we may need to experience arousal first before we have the desire. And
Mm-hmm.
then particularly in heterosexual coupling, women really need to activate their throat chakra, that the voice is critical. Sound is critical to pleasure and release. And so even speaking our truth of, I need more stimulation, or I'd like more of this, or this
Mm-hmm.
feels really good, and a little bit more of that, most women don't. I would say, at least the ones that I'm seeing in my practice, they're not vocalizing, because first off, they don't have a word for it. And so we need to create language, because
Mm-hmm.
language is really powerful. When we have words for what it is that we want to say, we can easily communicate it. And when we don't have words, it becomes much more difficult. And that's why oftentimes people aren't having conversations around sex in the bedroom, and they're certainly not having them outside of the bedroom, because they don't have a word for something that gives them pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have then a shared common language where there's fluency and comfort, and that's really critical. I mean, and I could go on and on about that, but the activation of the throat and
Mm-hmm.
pleasure is profoundly part of this experience of the psychedelic orgasm.
Okay. I love that you say that, because I do think it's so true. And I mean, as a girl who, stripper background, and I've obviously been in like, entertainment industry and talked to so many sex workers, and I've, like everything and anything. I've, been an open book to all of these things. Shockingly, even for the amount of information and, how exposed I have been to so many things, when it comes to your own personal intimacy, having those conversations, it doesn't matter what level of exposure you have or comfort you have talking about sex, seeing sex, desensitized by this. When it comes to your own personal journey of intimacy, it is so hard to vocalize those things in a way where you don't feel like, one, you're going to make your partner feel guilty or shameful for what maybe they didn't already do, or you're wanting from them that they haven't thought, and like it's like you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It's like, and like that's what I think we hold on to, is such a fear of like, how do I tell this person, you know, I need him to do more of this without him being offended, thinking he's not doing enough? Or how do I make sure he's open to receiving what I'm saying without taking it as a judgment to what, his lack or this or that? And, it again comes back to then we're not taking that ownership over our own pleasure because we're so concerned about the other person's. Like, I have a lot of girlfriends who have said to me, like, I really want to incorporate toys into our sex life, but I'm scared to make him feel inadequate if I pick a toy that's bigger than, his physical, size. And I don't want him to then think that, he's not big enough to pleasure me by me wanting this toy. And it's like, really, like that's the fear that women have to wanting to express and enjoy and do all of these things, is because we're so still fearful of how it's going to affect our partners, and I have a hard time speaking up even, and especially in person. It's one thing to do it, say, via over the phone or a text message of like, yeah, I really enjoyed that, I would love this, but face to face, those conversations, right away people shut down, you know?
Really good noticing. I absolutely agree. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot to do with our discomfort. I feel like there's inherent shaming of our own sexuality. And I would say that we all come from a sexual act, that sex is
Mm-hmm.
innocent, sex is natural. And when we're using pornography as education, right? Because it's entertainment, it's not education,
Mm-hmm.
but yet we all know it, whether we're watching it because we know it. It's kind of in the air you breathe, and that's all we get, then we're missing out all this other piece. And if we could teach young people, if we could begin to teach ourselves how to have more comfort and fluency in claiming this is what brings me pleasure, then it's kind of like I like a latte with hazelnut syrup in it and oat milk, as opposed to I like a cappuccino with full fat milk. I mean, it's just like, and
Yeah.
it's just a request, and it's just something that you can just say. But because we have so much overlay on our natural
Mm-hmm.
sexual expression, it becomes problematic, and I can't order the cappuccino or I can't order the latte in the way that I like it. And it really is just the same.
Oh, it is. I think women are starting to really open their minds more to being able to be expressive and wanting to heal these things, tapping into their own sexuality. I think men aren't obviously quite in that same realm of, this expression and this curiosity, or, those things quite yet. There is a few that I have seen, and I do notice that, some men are starting to, but I think it's almost waiting for them to kind of catch up to like where we're trying to go to be able to like, oh, okay, we can learn this together. We can heal this together. We can
Beautiful.
do this together, instead of it being like the women are up here now being like, okay, we've explored, we've expressed, we've healed, we've reclaimed this, but like, you know what? We need you to do this as well so that we can experience these full things together, these psychedelic orgasms together, and for a man to be able to tap into that, and to, even in a way have their sexual experiences being something that lasts longer than this 5 to 7 minute goal, and having it be something that is this beautiful experience that everybody is like, hey, you know what? Why didn't we do this sooner? Why didn't we learn about this sooner? Why didn't we open up these conversations sooner? But like, we're there, so like, let's enjoy this, right? Because that's
I
really what
love
it's
that.
about. Yeah.
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 I love it.
Yeah. That's why these conversations are so important, like that I think the women are having, and all of the information that is out there now is, the men are almost kind of getting bombarded with like this, seeing bits and pieces of it here and there. Women are talking about it more, they're more exposed to it through these podcasts, through the books, through social media, and it's like, whether they like it or not, they're eventually just going to have to be like, okay, let's have this conversation, because like, I want to be on the level you're getting to, and I want to experience those things with you. So yeah.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
And it really is about cultivating this invitation that men can really receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All these beautiful sex goals for everybody because everybody really should be enjoying their pleasure and enjoying orgasms. I really do believe, truly, like you said at the beginning, they are so healing and it's so therapeutic for your mental health, your physical health, to be able to step into that state of enjoyment and pleasure. So many health benefits come from it.
Absolutely. I had a friend who was a doctor who would prescribe for her patients vitamin O every day. So, orgasm every
Yeah.
day, vitamin O.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, this is amazing. Tara, for everybody listening, what is one last thing you just want everybody to know, whether it's about your practice, your book, these psychedelic orgasms, or just the journey of healing itself? What is something you just want to share with everybody to, help them kind of open up their minds to exploring this?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that really to be gentle with yourself, that there is no should.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you get to show up as your lovely self in every moment, and that when you are gentle with yourself and loving and kind to yourself, then it creates a better invitation for others to be that way with you. So I'd say just really be exquisitely gentle and caring to yourself. That's my message.
I love that. Where can everybody find you if they want to reach out? Where can they find your book? Is it audiobook, Amazon? Like, where can people get in touch with you to have some more of these conversations and learn for themselves if they want to?
Wonderful. So they can reach out to me on my website, taragaleano.com. My book is available on Amazon, Rediscovering My Body. And I also have a website, rediscoveringmybody.com.
Nice, amazing. And we'll put all of that information in the show notes for everybody too, all of your links so they can access you. Thank you so much. And you know what? I'm actually going to get your book. I'm really excited to kind of read it. I love learning more and I love this journey of, self-healing for sexuality and stuff. And I think it's beautiful, the information that is out there and that we have access to it the way that we do. Whether it's a personal journey we just do for ourselves at home, with books and information like this, or from reaching out to other people who are going through it as well. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing your wisdom and all of your information.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.